Good morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Chung. I'm the president and CEO for the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation and the World Trade Center Los Angeles. Thank you so much for joining us for our quarterly LAEDC economic briefing. The last briefing was back in May, and since then, a lot has happened. And today, we would like to catch you up on some of the economic activities that's been happening across the nation as well as Los Angeles. So you'll be hearing from our Institute for Applied Economics team, where they're going to be sharing more updated information with you. But meanwhile, over the last few months since we've last seen you at the quarterly economic briefing, LAEDC has been busy with a number of different activities and events, all to make sure that we're able to continue to push forward with our mission of making sure that we're able to drive inclusive economic development growth and creating economic prosperity for all Angelenos. We continue to convene so that we can find solutions for our collective good here, and we implement some of those solutions through our 5-pillar economic development strategies, which include business assistance, workforce development, international trade, engagement, and of course, research. Our hope is that we can continue to make sure that the 5-pillar approach develops and supports our industry clusters here so that we can create good paying jobs and also entrepreneurship and also business opportunities here throughout the Los Angeles region. And as I was mentioning, since May, your teams here in Los Angeles have been working diligently to make sure we're able to produce those results. Shortly after our economic briefing event, we had our 10th annual Select LA Investment Summit, where we welcomed hundreds of international and domestic companies and leaders so that we can showcase the international connectivity right here in Los Angeles. This is especially important because of the recent trade and tariffs issues that have been impacting not only Los Angeles, but the entire nation and the entire world as well. During the Select LA Investment Summit, we also released a new report on foreign direct investment throughout the state of California. In this last year alone, the Institute for Applied Economics found that there are close to 19,000 foreign-owned enterprises supporting directly over 814,000 jobs. That contributes on an annual basis over $89 billion in wages to the California economy. You can find more information on our website, laedc.org. Similarly, our workforce development team has continued to move forward, and they have actually produced our Future Forum event, Reimagining LA's Manufacturing Center in June. And in that conversation, we really focus on the future of manufacturing, what that means, especially in light of some of the trade tariffs and some of the international changes that are happening, and what that means to job creation here locally. Your business assistance team has worked very diligently to continue to provide services to our small companies and medium-sized companies here, especially those that were impacted by the wildfire. They've launched a number of business resource centers to support our local businesses here, and we're working in collaboration with the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity, as well as the City of Los Angeles, to ensure that we have seamless delivery of services. And this is supported by the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And finally, your Institute for Applied Economics continue to do a number of different reports, including the fire report updates, which will be shared over the next few months. Additionally, the County of Los Angeles has asked LAEDC to partner with the Department of Opportunity to study the impact of immigration actions that are impacting all local communities here. Lastly, our California Jobs First team has recently worked together with the California Community Foundation, as well as the LA Collaborative, to release $9 million of funding that was given to us by the state of California. And 26 of the local groups were able to receive this $9 million to create economic mobility initiatives to make sure that we have innovation and community-driven approach so that we can solve some of the issues here in the local region. So over the last few months, we've continued to be very busy. We want to make sure that you are aware of all the activities that are happening. Please stay tuned with the LAEDC website so you know some of the activities that are coming up, including our 88 City Summit that's coming up in October, and also our Eddie Awards, our 30th annual Eddie Awards, which we'll talk about at the end in November. So with that, I would like to now welcome our Institute for Applied Economics, led by Shannon Cedric, who is our Senior Director for Institute for Applied Economics, to share more about what's happening with economic briefings. And before we start, I do want to highlight that after the presentation, there's going to be a Q&A session. So please start thinking about your questions and enter it in the Q&A, and we'll facilitate the questions at the end. Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for LADC's quarterly economic briefing. As Stephen mentioned, I'm Shannon Sedgwick, and I'm the Senior Director of the Institute for Applied Economics here at LADC. Before we dive into today's outlook on the U.S. and Los Angeles County economies, I'd like to take a moment to share some exciting updates from our team. Next slide. We're very pleased to welcome two new colleagues to the Institute for Applied Economics. First, Ricky, who introduced or started today's webinar. Ricky Michelle joins us as our new research administrator. Many of you may already know him from his years of dedicated work with LAEDC's Business Assistance Program. He brings a wealth of experience supporting local businesses, and we're excited for the perspective and expertise he now brings to our research team. We're also thrilled to introduce Dr. Max Chomas, our new associate economist. Max comes to us from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, where he conducted research there as an economist. And his background will strengthen our capacity to deliver data-driven insights for the region. With Ricky and Max joining our talented group and brilliant group of economists and analysts, our team's really well positioned to continue to deliver timely, relevant analysis that helps inform decision-making across Los Angeles County. Now let's get started with today's briefing. Next slide, please. So today we'll be covering the macroeconomy at the U.S. level, what's happening in Los Angeles in terms of employment, and we're thrilled to share an overview of our newly updated industry cluster study that maps all traded and local clusters across Los Angeles County. So this study will be released and made available this week on our website. Next slide. And with that, I will pass it over to Dr. Justin Adams to share the national update.
Good morning, everyone. So today I'll be covering key indicators of U.S. economic performance through the second quarter of 2025. I'll touch on 6 areas in particular: GDP growth, unemployment, trade policy impacts, consumer expectations and sentiment, and business investment patterns. So next slide, please. So let's jump in with real GDP growth. So during our webinar 3 months ago, we were focused on how economic growth turned negative in the first quarter of 2025. This contraction, which was initially estimated at negative 0.3%, came in anticipation of large-scale tariffs being imposed on major and minor trading partners, as well as on tariffs being imposed on select commodities. While the Q1 2025 contraction was later revised downward to negative 0.5%, it didn't actually persist into the second quarter of 2025. Instead, the U.S. economy demonstrated remarkable resilience, with real GDP growing at a robust 3.0% annualized rate. This growth rate was consistent with the solid growth that we saw at the end of 2023, well, since the end of 2023. Next slide, please. So turning to labor market conditions, the unemployment picture also presents some unexpected stability. The official unemployment rate, which is in red, stands at 4.2% as of July 2025. Since February, the unemployment rate has fluctuated between 4.1 and 4.2%, so it's consistent. The broader U6 measure, which is in green, this includes discouraged workers and those employed part-time for economic reasons. So it's a broader indicator of unemployment. It tells a similar story. While this measure has ticked up to 7.9% from 7.7% the previous month, it too remains within a relatively steady range. Next slide, please. So in light of changing tariff policy, why have we seen a snapback in real GDP growth in the second quarter? And why has the labor market remained relatively stable? The short answer is that the US has not yet seen tariffs fully bite. So this chart, which is based on calculations from the Yale Budget Lab, shows the dramatic change in tariff policy that has taken place in 2025. So average effective tariff rates, which started at 2.4% in early January, skyrocketed to a peak of just under 28% by April 13th. So that represents a more than tenfold increase in just over 3 months. But tariffs remained at this level for only a month. Um, so after capitulation day, which was on May 12th, tariff rates fell dramatically, settling at 18.6% by August 6th. So the relatively lower rates on Chinese imports after May 12th, it really gave importers the opportunity to stock up on goods, which helped shield US consumers from what could have been severe price increases. Next slide, please. So data from the University of Michigan illustrate this point about consumers being shielded from price hikes. Consumers' expectations of inflation over the following 12 months, which is shown here in red, it fell beginning in May with capitulation day. Similarly, consumer expectations of inflation over the next 5 years, which is shown in green, that dropped as well. It should be noted that while both short-term and long-term expectations of inflation declined after May, they remained higher than levels that we saw at the beginning of the year. So tariffs are having an impact. And now that we're seeing pauses on tariffs being lifted and more stability in tariff policy, consumer expectations are starting to change as well. As of August 2025, consumers expect inflation of about 4.9% over the next 12 months, and that represents an uptick from recent lows. 5-year inflation expectations have also risen. They've risen to 3.9%, which suggests that consumers think that these current inflationary pressures will likely persist. Next slide, please. So along with fluctuations in consumer expectations on inflation, we've seen corresponding fluctuations in consumer sentiment. So these data are also from the University of Michigan. After reaching 71.7 in December 2024, consumer sentiment actually plummeted to a low of 52.2 in May 2025. And this was a decline of just over 20% in 5 months. And you can see this was followed by a modest bounce back after capitulation day. But we can see with the August reading of 58.6 that this recovery has been short-lived. If consumers continue to believe that inflation will persist over the long term and over the short term and long term, we can expect consumer confidence to remain significantly depressed, particularly relative to the levels that we saw prior to 2025. Next slide, please. So we've talked a lot about consumers and consumer sentiment so far. So let's say a quick word about business sentiment. So we can get some insight into business confidence and long-term growth prospects by examining business investment patterns. So here we look at non-residential fixed investment, which includes spending on structures, equipment, and intellectual property. The second quarter of 2025 showed continued growth in business investment at about 1.9%. But you can see that this represents a notable drop from the exceptional 10.3% growth rate in the first quarter. Keep in mind that the Q1 surge may have been influenced by a couple of factors. So this includes businesses front-loading investments ahead of expected policy changes, And it also represents, Q1 reflects a snapback from the depressed reading that we see in the fourth quarter of 2024, where business investment slowed due to policy uncertainty around the US presidential election. That said, the 1.9% rate in the second quarter of 2025, it's roughly half of the growth rates that we've seen in recent history. And so if it continues at these levels into next quarter, it'll definitely be a cause for concern. Next slide, please. So on the horizon, when you think about the second quarter of 2025, it was in many ways a transitional quarter in which severe tariff policies were enacted and then modified and then temporarily paused. And that isn't to mention the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July. So as tariff policies hopefully stabilize over the next few weeks, and there is no guarantee of that, and as we learn more about the spending cuts from the One Big Beautiful Bill, we should get some greater clarity into the implications for economic growth over the remainder of this year. And with that, next slide. With that, to my colleague, Dan Wei.
All right, thank you, Justin. So next, we are going to switch gear and take a look at the latest local employment numbers for LA County, covering the data through July 2025. So looking on this chart, in July, total non-farm employment stood at about 4.57 million jobs. So this is down from 4.6 million jobs in June. This means the county lost roughly 30,000 jobs in the past months, or this represents a decline of about 2/3%. Even with this drop in the last months, compared with July of last year, employment in LA County is actually up. The county added about 33,500 jobs over the past 12 months, or a gain of about 0.74%. Also, despite the decline in July, LA County's labor market remains stronger than before the pandemic. As of July, non-farm employment is still 27,200 jobs above April 2019 levels. So this shows resilience in the local labor market, but still future trends can be influenced by evolving economic conditions and policy changes. Next slide, please. Okay, so in LA County, the unemployment rate, the blue curve are shown in the chart, increased sharply over the past couple of months, rising from 5.1% in April to 5.9% in June, and then to 6.4% in July. So this marks the highest level since late 2023, this unemployment rate in July. So the sharp rise of the unemployment rate was largely driven by the influence of local industry dynamics and seasonal employment patterns, such as in educational services sectors, which we will look more in a moment. At the state level, California's unemployment rate has been relatively stable. It held steady at about 5.3% in April and May, before rising slightly to 5.5% in July. Overall, the state has remained within a narrow band of 5.2% to 5.5% unemployment rate since late 2023. Finally, the US unemployment rate fell to 3.9% in April, but has since climbing up to 4.6% by July, suggesting a softening in the national job market. So one note here, this is a non-seasonal adjusted unemployment rate, so it is a bit different from what Justin just showed a moment ago. All right, so next slide, please. Okay, so looking at monthly employment changes by industry, healthcare and social assistance led the gains, adding 7,200 jobs. This is followed by arts, entertainment, and recreation, adding 1,600 jobs. Manufacturing, 1,400 jobs added last month. And transportation and warehousing, as well as other services sectors, both of them added 1,100 jobs in July. On the flipping side, the declines were mainly in government and private educational services, which together drove the overall monthly drop in July. And this is primarily due to the seasonal cycle of education-related jobs, such as instructional aides, cafeteria workers, and seasonal administrative staff. So those positions usually end in June and resume with the new school year in late summer. So this is why we're seeing this sharp summer drop of employment in both the local government and private educational services sectors. So this can be observed every year in the summer months. Okay, next slide, please. So next, shifting to year-over-year changes, LA County's total non-farm employment increased by 0.74% over the year. Healthcare and social assistance, again, is the main driver of the increase, adding almost 48,000 jobs as demand for medical as well as social services continued to rise. Government, private educational services, and information sectors also contribute to the annual job growth, even though these sectors experienced some declines in the recent months. On the other side, we do see certain industries faced job losses over the year. So manufacturing sector experienced the largest yearly losses, driven by declines in durable goods manufacturing of 7,900 jobs and non-durable goods manufacturing of 5,100 jobs. So this trend reflects the ongoing contraction in this sector in LA County, largely driven by automation, global computation, and industry structural shifts in the region. Other sectors, including construction, financial activities, professional and business services, wholesale trade, accommodation, and food services, other services also experienced job declines over the year. So employment shifts across sectors emphasize the need for targeted investment in sectors that show continued and strong growth, while maybe retraining and transition support might be important for those sectors undergoing some structural changes. Seasonal patterns like those we observed in education sector should be distinguished from long-term structural declines. So future labor market trends will continue to be shaped by evolving economic conditions, technological advancements, and policy changes, including spending cuts, tariffs, and immigration actions. So all of these introduce additional uncertainty to the local labor market. We are going to closely monitor those trends and changes in the coming months and report back again in the following quarterly briefing. All right, with that, next slide. Okay, I will pass it on to Matthew and Max to introduce our latest study on industry clusters.
All right, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Justin, for those overviews. So now Max and I are going to preview our industry cluster report that's going to be released soon. This is an update to LA County's, or to our LA County industry clusters, and focuses on results for both 2023 and 2024. We last updated our analysis in early 2024 with data through 2022. And that report provided useful insights on the post-COVID recovery. So this year's report just builds on that and is a comprehensive update with data through 2024, which was the last year data was available from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we'll quickly outline the report structure and then move through the overviews for our 4 traded cluster aggregations or groups. Those include trade, entertainment, fashion, and biomedical. And finally, we'll also take a look at the major local clusters as a group. Next slide. Okay, so first, LA County by the numbers. In 2024, LA County's gross county product was about 886 billion. So if LA County was a country, a standalone country, that would have ranked about 20th in the world. So very large. We're home to nearly 9.8 million people and support over 4.5 million jobs. There are also more than 1.3 million small businesses in Los Angeles County. And among all US counties, we have the highest share of women and BIPOC-owned small businesses. So in short, the scale here is vast and something to keep in mind when we're zooming into the different clusters. Next page. So some background on the industry clusters. When related industries co-locate, they share suppliers, they share talent, and they share infrastructure. And this proximity raises productivity and innovation. So we measure how concentrated each cluster is using location quotients or LQs. And so an LQ above 1.0 means that the industry is more concentrated in Los Angeles County than it is nationally. So we analyzed employment and wages for private sector industries only. We mapped the NAICS industries to standardized cluster definitions, which are the same definitions we used in past reports. And the data sources included the BLS, as well as supplements from California Employment Development Department and IMPLAN. And we'll look at employment, at wages, and LQ to compare Los Angeles County to the US as a whole. Our report also provides historical employment going back to 2007 for each cluster. Next slide. So this table takes a look at the clusters included in the report. They're split into traded and local clusters. And then we also have our cluster groups or aggregations, which are multiple clusters grouped together. So this table splits it between traded and local clusters. On the traded side, business services, distribution, and e-commerce are the largest employers, followed by education and knowledge creation, video production and distribution. Then on the local side, we highlight health, hospitality, community and civic organizations, and commercial services, which anchor day-to-day jobs. Next slide. So the cluster groups or cluster aggregations that we feature in the report, we have 4 of them that we included, and these have strong linkages because they move together in supply chains and in talent pipelines. So first we had trade, which combines distribution and e-commerce, transportation and logistics, which includes trucking, warehousing, air cargo, and couriers, and water transportation, which is tied to the ports. The entertainment group brings together video production and distribution, which includes production, post-production, and streaming. It also has performing arts, which includes artists, agents, and promoters. And then music and sound recording, which includes music labels, publishers, and studios. Then our fashion group includes apparel and textile manufacturing. Some of the related niches like footwear, leather, and jewelry are noted in the report, but they're not covered in depth due to their smaller employment levels. But they are included in this fashion group. And then we have biomedical, which includes biopharmaceuticals and medical devices, which is both instruments and supplies. So the report presents each aggregation first and then its component clusters on the following pages. Next slide. So before we look at the individual cluster groups, let's ground ourselves in the countywide employment. So LA in 2022, we nearly regained our 2019 levels of employment. However, there was a slight dip in 2023, but in 2024, we saw our level rise to pre-19 levels. So that headline recovery hides the kind of different paths across the clusters. That it wasn't a uniform growth or recovery across them, and that's why this cluster lens matters. We can see who's who's growing, who's thriving, who's surviving, and who's falling a little bit. So we'll use this as a baseline for the momentum slides that follow. Next slide. So since 2022, the numbers that were presented in our previous report, the biggest gains have occurred in hospitality and tourism, in education and knowledge creation, in local community and civic organizations, local health services, and performing arts. There are some other clusters with gains that included local hospitality, transportation and logistics, aerospace and defense, communications equipment and services, music and sound recording, and food processing. So the main takeaway since 2022, the real rebound has been driven by services and experience-driven activities. Next slide. So where is LA the most competitive by location quotient? So as we said, industry's location quotient compares local job share to the US share. And an LQ above 1.0 means that there's more concentration here than the US average. So here's the most competitive concentrations we had. Included mostly entertainment components, they dominated. So we had video production and distribution, music and sound recording, and performing arts. Video production and distribution was at 13.8 as a location quotient. Music and sound recording came in at 7.4, and performing arts was at 3.7. We also had apparel at 6.3 and aerospace and defense at 2.9. And just to note that while apparel is still more concentrated in LA County than the nation overall, the concentration has fallen sharply since the mid-2000s as production has increasingly been offshored. Next slide. So right below that top tier, we see solid concentrations in several other industries. Those include water transportation, marketing, design, and publishing, transportation and logistics, communications equipment and services, and education and knowledge creation, plus several niche industries. So these clusters are competitive today, but they do have room to move even higher. So when we're talking about location quotient, there's really a couple ways that they can increase their LQ. If they outgrow the county average, the LQ rises when a cluster's job grows faster than total county employment, so the local share gets larger. They can outpace the US in that cluster, since LQ is relative, gains are strongest when LA growth exceeds national growth and for the same cluster. And then there's also can be improvements in depth. So with more establishments, denser supply networks, and larger specialized talent pools, that makes co-location more attractive and tends to lift this concentration. Quick notes, though, LQ can also tick up if the national share falls while LA holds steady, but that's not really the growth story we're looking for. We're looking for areas where we're actually growing beyond what the US is. And then also a cluster conversely could add jobs that still see that LQ slip if the other local sectors are growing faster than that cluster. So with that framing in mind, we'll take a look at our 4 cluster groups that included entertainment, trade, biomedical, and fashion, each with the recent trends and current snapshot, so you can see how the numbers translate on the ground. Next slide. So first cluster group we'll look at is entertainment. And we can see that after the pandemic slump, entertainment surged in 2022. It peaked at nearly 190,000 jobs, which was about 5.5% of county employment. In 2023, we saw a drop of roughly 40,000 jobs, though, bringing that share down to just under 4%. In 2024, we did see stabilization, though. We stabilized at around 150,000 jobs. And because video production and distribution makes up about 2/3 of this group, most of this swing was in that component. Performing arts continue to gradual rebound, and then music and sound recording stayed smaller, but still very concentrated. So the volatility eased in 2024, but the group, it still remains one of LA's signature traded strengths. Next slide. So we can see that today the group sits at just under 150,000 jobs with an LQ around 7.4, which is huge by national standards. The average earnings were also really significant. They were around 166,000 for this group, which is more than double the county average. This mix is led by video production and distribution, which had about 100,000 jobs and an LQ around 13.8. Also, the average earnings in video production and distribution were around 151,000, so very high. This was followed by performing arts promoters and managers. There are about 45,000 jobs. The LQ in that group was about 3.7, and average earnings were even higher at nearly 200,000. And then finally, we have music and sound recording. There's about 4,500 jobs, leading to an LQ of 7.3. And average earnings were still strong, although a little bit lower than the other two, at 146,000. So overall, this is a top-tier traded cluster in both concentration and wage premium. And keep in mind, LQ is relative. So if other regions or if other LA sectors grow faster, that can drive the LQ down, even when jobs are and the pay here tick up. So, and that's why we track both the trend going back to 2007 and this snapshot of the current year. And for the next group, I'll pass it over to Max, my colleague. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Matthew. So I'll start here by talking about the trade cluster group. If we take a look at the most recent 3 years of employment for this cluster group, we can see that starting in 2022, there was this rebound in employment from the pandemic slump that occurred in 2020. However, it seems like the employment levels have ticked down slightly since then, kind of returning to the pre-pandemic range. If you look at the employment for this cluster group as a share of the county employment, that percentage has been decreasing. If you take a look at the purple line, since about 2022, and we would attribute this decrease mostly to faster employment growth in other sectors. Next slide, please. Taking a look at this cluster group a little more carefully, we can see that it's comprised of about 285,000 jobs. So the trade cluster group is critical to the ports in Los Angeles, along with goods movements in the region. If you take a look at the pie chart at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the wholesaling of non-durable goods industry comprises the largest share of employment for this cluster group at about 93,000 jobs. Taking a look at the right side of the screen, you can see that the trade cluster group has a higher average salary than the Los Angeles County average. Further, the water transportation cluster within the trade cluster group, while it's not listed, does have has the highest average salary amongst the clusters in this group. Further, if we think about concentration, the marine cargo handling cluster has a very high concentration in the Los Angeles area relative to the national concentration. In general, the trade cluster group component clusters such as water transportation, marine cargo handling, distribution and e-commerce, and then transportation and logistics provide an ability for businesses to upscale their operation and also allow these businesses to link into broader supply chains. Next slide, please. Moving on to the biomedical cluster group, we can see in the most recent 3 years that in 2020, we kind of have this all-time high in employment. However, there's this kind of slight pullback in employment after 2022 and 2023 onward to employment levels that more resemble that was occurring in 2018 and 2019. If we take a look at the share of the county jobs that this cluster group comprises, it's kind of eased down since 2022, starting from about 0.45% in 2022 and then ending around 0.41% in 2024. Next slide, please. So digging in a bit more in this cluster group, we can see that it commands about 15,000 jobs in total. So this cluster group is comprised of 2 clusters, one being biopharmaceuticals and the other being medical devices. If you take a look at the pie chart at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the medical devices cluster comprises a higher share of employment than the biopharmaceuticals cluster. The medical devices cluster, although it's not explicitly listed, also has the highest average salary. And however, its location quotient, or its kind of local concentration, sits below that of the US average. So in general, this cluster group has a high average salary, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. The cluster group's average is well above that of Los Angeles County. And it also provides this kind of strong middle skill pathway to employment. And this cluster group is able to do this by using Los Angeles's research and development and manufacturing base. Next slide, please. So the final traded cluster group that we'll look at is the fashion cluster group. Again, starting the most recent 3 years. We can see that in 2022, there was this kind of high unemployment from the pandemic slump that occurred in 2020. However, after that, in 2023 and 2024, we have this kind of decline in employment that kind of seems to fit into the long run decline in employment for this cluster group. And further, we also see this kind of similar downward trend for this cluster group share of county jobs, which is now well below 1%. Next slide, please. So when we look a little bit more closely at this cluster group, we can see that it's comprised of about 28,000 jobs. It's made of multiple clusters, but the apparel and textile manufacturing cluster have the largest shares of employment, with apparel having about 2/3 of this cluster group's jobs. And if we take a look at the average salary for this cluster group, we can see that it's slightly below the LA County average. In general, it appears that the fashion cluster group has been experiencing a very long-term decline in its employment levels, starting in about 2007, at least from our data. We saw that there was a brief rebound to this employment after the COVID-19 pandemic. However, after 2022, this rebound seemed to be over, and employment started to trend down again. I would note, however, that this cluster group is still well concentrated in the Los Angeles area relative to the nation as a whole currently. However, its high concentration in Los Angeles is lower than what it used to be back in the mid-2000s. Next slide, please. So now we're going to shift our focus from the traded clusters groups to the local clusters group. We can see for this local clusters group that in 2022, there was this kind of strong post-pandemic rebound. And then in the years after that, there was still an increase, but the rate of increase was lower. And then by 2024, this local clusters group share of county employment had risen to 41%, which was an all-time high for the local clusters group. So in general, what we can see from this graph is that the local clusters group has kind of led the jobs recovery in Los Angeles County since the pandemic in 2020. And further, it now comprises a very large portion of LA's employment base. Next slide, please. So digging a little bit into this local clusters group, we can see that it's made of 4 major components. If you take a look at the pie chart on the bottom of the screen, you can see that, for example, the largest employment component is the local health services, standing at about 507,000 employees. Average wages for each component of this group vary dramatically. Some of them are closer to the county average, while some of them aren't. In general, the local clusters group, each component seems to kind of have its own utility, where, for example, if we look at local health services, it is the largest, has the largest number of employees. And it also has a very high average salary, suggesting that it has a very strong kind of, provides a very strong economic opportunity for those in the region. If, on the other hand, we look at local hospitality establishments, for example, while it also has a large number of employees, it also has a fairly small salary compared to the LA County average, suggesting that perhaps this component is more focused on affordability. Next slide, please.
Great. If I can have all the presenters come back on screen, and Ricky, if you can stop sharing the slide. We have a number of questions that's been asked already, and some of them have been answered. So I'm going to go through the list to make sure the next 15 minutes we're able to answer those questions. For those of you who have additional questions, please keep typing it in. We'll answer as many as possible. So the first question came from Joshua Baum. Yes, we're able to share the slides, and the recording we'll be posting it later today at the ladc.org website, along with other reports that we'll be listing. So Dan, you already answered this first question, but there's a person that was asking, are there specific certain industries in the LA region that are more impacted by the tariffs? Can you guys go into a bit more detail so the rest of the audience can get the answer as well?
Yeah, sure. So the increased tariff will definitely affect the volume of imported cargoes coming through the ports. So first of all, the ports, the logistics, and also warehousing sectors will definitely be more impacted by the tariff increase. And also some related industry that will be affected, maybe the real estate sector. If there's a contraction in the warehousing sectors, then there will be less investment in the establishment of new warehousing sites. So the real estate sector might also be affected. And another sector I mentioned here is the construction sector, because of the increased cost of some major building materials, including steel, copper, and aluminum, maybe timber. So those the building materials, the increase of those costs will definitely increase the cost of the construction and also potentially affect the rebuilding process in the county.
Thank you, Dan. And I think separately, we have had different businesses reach out to us. Manufacturing also was somewhat impacted because some of those manufacturers require component parts from other countries as well. So there are a number of different industries that are affected. Additionally, tourism actually was slightly impacted as well. We've seen a number of different countries, including Canada, that canceled a lot of their flights to the United States, including Los Angeles, from the range of March into October. So the tariffs definitely had some impact on our local industries. Another question came up as well. Let's see. I think Shannon, you answered it. Elizabeth was asking, are you going to be able to show or share a map of the various clusters? Shannon, you want to jump in and answer that you typed in already?
So it is possible for us to spatially display concentrations of employment by industry cluster across the county. We typically do that for cluster specific deep dive studies. And so an example of a recent study that we did that for was our trade and logistics report that was released earlier this year. I did provide the link. I don't know if everyone has, I could put it in the chat as well. That will bring you directly to that study if you're curious to see what that looks like. We also did a data dashboard as well that allows you to dive into some of the transportation systems that exist across the county, actually Southern California. And so you can see the numbers on a more specific scale visually through the dashboard as well. And that's accessible through the link that I'll provide in chat in just a second.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Dan, you answered this already. A sharp-eyed individual is asking the asterisks on the apparel. What does it indicate?
Oh, yeah. So that's just a note that although we see the apparel manufacturing industry still have a relatively higher location quotient, it still has more concentrated in LA County compared to the national average level. But this industry concentration has been fallen over time. So this is just a note to that. Because of this offshoring trend, so more of the production manufacturing of this sector has been shifted overseas. So maybe Matthew can say more on this.
Yeah, so this one, I guess it's kind of just a note, because although we do have a higher location quotient, so we're more competitive in the US, when we look globally, we are facing a lot more competition for overseas. So that's what's causing this one to fall as far as LQ and just employment levels overall.
Another question came up, biologics or biological products. What does it mean? Shannon? You're on mute.
Yeah, I think I answered that one too. So they are basically products that are derived from living organisms. So they're used in various applications, a lot in medicine. And so that's why they're included in that cluster. And so examples of biologics in medicine include like vaccines, gene therapies, blood products, platelets, plasma. And then outside of that, in agriculture, biologics are products are like fertilizers. And then even in some cleaning products like enzymes. So it's derived from living organisms.
Great, thank you. Does the industry cluster report also have ideas or the needs of some of these clusters to support them as they're doing business in the area?
I'll jump in on.
Sorry,
Okay.
go ahead, Shannon.
I'll just jump in again that this is a report of all the industry clusters that we produce here at LAEDC on an annual basis now. So typically we provide policy recommendations and other resources for commission studies that really dive deeper into these individual clusters. And I think in this year's report, there are a few examples when we're looking at biomedical and our entertainment cluster, but we don't have them available in this overview for each one.
And I'll jump in here as well. The industry cluster report itself does not have that information, as Shannon's saying. However, LADC, one of the things that we like to say is that we don't want to be a think tank, right? We take the information, we want to do something with it. We want to be a do tank. So the information and data that's provided through these reports allow us to basically do industry cluster development work. As I was mentioning at the opening, we have a 5-pillar approach. And one of the things we do is we convene our public, private, nonprofit, academic, community, labor, environmental partners from around Los Angeles so they can come together to come up with some of the solutions. And some of these solutions are industry cluster focused. So this will actually allow us to do industry cluster blueprints, a step-by-step instruction of what we need to do to support these industries. So keep checking on the website as we're having more of these industry cluster activities. You're going to see some recommendations and some specific analysis in terms of the needs that are going to be needed by these industry partners and these businesses in terms of what we need to do as a region. I'll give you a quick example. We've been working very closely with a number of different partners, including Bioscience LA, Larda Institute, Department of Economic Opportunity, Biocom, and through these kind of collaborative efforts, we've identified that for the bioscience sector and the life science sectors, they need more graduation space. So when companies are spinning out of UCLA, USC, Caltech, they're able to basically land somewhere and grow. And so they need wet lab space and they need graduation space. So those are some of the policy recommendations that are now moving forward. How do we create additional supportive services for these companies to basically grow in the Los Angeles region? So again, each industry is going to be very different, and we'll provide you with more information, and please track us on our website. Okay, there are a couple more questions I will go to. Sorry, I'm going to go through the slide. Are you able to go into residential investment this year at all? Team?
So we presented data on the non-residential fixed investment at the U.S. level, and the Bureau of Economic Analysis does provide data on residential investment, but only at the national level. It doesn't provide it at the state or local level. So we could, we'd have to, I'm assuming that you're interested in more of a local focus. There are things that we can take a look at. So census data, permits, Census Bureau permit data other types of sources. I'm certain that we will include some of this analysis in our wildfire study updates.
Carlo asked the question, how is the County of Los Angeles thinking about the exodus of film production jobs to places like Atlanta?
I'll jump in here. So not just the county, but the state as well. So you saw the changes that occurred in employment when Matthew shared the entertainment cluster chart. You did see what was happening there was in 2022, you saw a massive increase in production. That was due to these projects that came back online that were delayed during the pandemic. When you had the dual strikes, you saw a sharp, you saw a drop in activity, and we haven't really picked back up. So that was where the big effort at the state level took place, expanding the funds made available to the credit, reconfiguring those tax credits to include different types of activity that weren't previously allowable. And so at the state level, what they've done kind of what they can do at the moment, and now we're looking at more of the local jurisdictions to step in. And so LA County has been making some movements. They're looking at what they can do in terms of assessing their the fees that are being charged. They're looking at, are there other ways that they can support the various types of activity as a supplement to the expanded tax credit? And the city of Los Angeles has done the same thing with one of their executive directors. We're, as an industry, now we have to find out ways as organizations that are looking to support this industry to help prop up and attract, because the reality is, we still are competing against other jurisdictions. And Los Angeles County, while once, on a poll of producers where it was once number one, we've fallen down to number 6 behind all of these others. Something to keep in mind too, in the tax credit expansion, we have the tax credit is structured differently here. So we have things like job ratios that have to be fulfilled before you can actually receive the credit. All of the above the line expenses do not qualify for the credit. So there's a complexity that exists here too that requires us as economic developers, as industry representatives, and the public entities to really kind of rally together to find ways to prevent the further hemorrhaging of the industry here.
Yeah. Thank you, Carlo, for that question. This is an issue that I think LADC is very much interested in, and I think across the board, working very closely, besides the city of Los Angeles County and the state, but there are many cities across Los Angeles County, Burbank and Glendale and other folks are actually jumping in. I saw as a participant, Valley Economic Alliance, Sonia Blake was on as well, and I know that her group and other local community groups as well and business groups are coming together to make sure that we're able to defend our turf and defend our territory, as many states and other jurisdictions are actively recruiting and try to poach some of these companies. And that's why the report and the data is so important for us to understand the true impact. I see that it's at 12 o'clock. We're running out of time. So I know there are a couple other questions that are left. Please continue to engage with us so that we can answer your questions in the future. Thank you so much for joining us. Ricky, if you can put up the last slide before folks start leaving us, is that we will have the quarterly updates for everybody that's coming up every single quarter. Additionally, if you can also join us for the 88 Cities Fall Summit that will be happening on October 15th at the Port of Long Beach. Looking forward to joining you there. Registration information you can find on our website. And then we hope that you guys can all come join us for the 30th anniversary of our Economic Development Eddie Awards. That's going to be happening at the Pasadena Rose Bowl this year. This is going to be a great gala. It's our only fundraiser for the year, really celebrating the economic developers and the economic development drivers for this entire region. And we have just recently announced the awardees. So please track our social media and our website for more information. We hope you're able to join us. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a fantastic day. See you soon.